Welcome, first of all of you. I'm really happy to host this event this evening, which is realized in collaboration by the Consul General of Italy in Mumbai and the Italian Cultural Center in Mumbai. We are this evening celebrating a great figure, which is Chiara Lubich, an Italian national, but belonging during her life to the world, to the people. We will know way more about her this evening, and we will converse and talk both with Dr. Gentilini, which is here with us, joined us from Italy, and we're very glad for your time, and with Dr. Kezevino Aram, who is joining us from Coimbatore. Thanks to both of you for being here. Dr. Gentilini is an author, is a professor, is part of the CNR, the National Center for Research in Italy, which is the highest, the most important center for research, he joined already a few years back, where he covered different positions. He's from Trento, from the very north of Italy, the very same city where Chiara Lubich was born 100 years ago. And he also the author, and this is the pleasure that I have to launch officially his book in India, of the biography of Chiara Lubich on the 100th anniversary of her birth. This is called Prophet of Unity, and this is what we deem Chiara Lubich was. So thanks a lot, Dr. Gentilini, who have a very long history of publication and researches. Is too long to be said, but we will make sure that our public will be aware of your entire curriculum. The same I would like to say to Dr. Kezevino Aram, who has a very long history of community work. She's the president since 2001 of the Shanti Ashram in Coimbatore, where she is really living up to the heritage from her parents, both coming from the Gandhian movement. Shanti Ashram is a beautiful place dedicated to community work, as I said, to the social community, especially for children. Dr. Aram is a pediatrician, and she completed her studies both in India and the United States, and she is a dear friend of Italy. It has been a great pleasure to talk separately in the light of this specific event with both of you. And I really felt very much enriched from what I heard from your side. So I would like to try to make this, again, an encounter of will and spirituality. Chiara Lubich was born in 1920 in Trento. She lived in very challenging times and a changing century. And she became a prominent figure, where she won many prizes for peace, unity, starting from her own belief and religion. She was a woman, of course, of faith, Catholic, deeply believing in what she was doing, and the very important, we'll know more about that, but the very important momentum of her work and her belief is the foundation of the movement of Focolare Movement, which has so many points of understanding and in common with many other movements and religions. And this is why Chiara Lubich has been celebrated during 2020 all over the world. There was a beautiful exhibition. Dr. Gentilini is one of the curators. We were deemed to host it in Mumbai this year. It was not possible for the current situation. So, but I would like to tell to everyone that the exhibition will be available until the end of February 2021. And it is now also available as a virtual tour with English subtitles. So again, we will make sure that whoever is our audience today will be able, if they want, and I strongly recommend that, to visit also the exhibition. I also would like to stress really the importance of being in dialogue from different point of views to just reach unity. As very wisely the biography written by Maurizio Gentilini says, prophet of unity. So I would like to start with Dr. Gentilini. And as I mentioned, Chiara Lubich was an outstanding figure who really walked through all over the 20th century. When she was born, she became an adult during Second World War and in the aftermath. That in that north of Italy was really tragic. In spite of all those difficulties, of really the worst also that humankind can show, Chiara Lubich grew stronger in her faith, in her commitment and duty, wanting to work together. And she received, as I mentioned, many prizes. The Templeton Prize for Progress in Religion in 1977, the UNESCO Prize for Peace and Education in 1996, the Human Rights Award of the Council of Europe in 1998. And she was herself in touch and part also of the larger political movement that went on in Italy, and not only. Chiara Lubich visited India twice. She was in Mumbai twice, and this is why I mentioned we would have liked to host here the exhibition, and we're proud to host this event today. Now, Dr. Gentilini, this was the official figure of part, at least the beginning of the official figure of Chiara Lubich. Would you please tell us a bit about Chiara? Who was Chiara?
Yes, thank you for your invitation. It's a great pleasure and then an honor for me. We are talking about a charismatic woman and a spiritual leader, a witness and a protagonist of the 20th century, who is difficult to place within the schemes we usually use to describe and classify public figures. Dr. Costanza has already introduced Chiara's public dimension. I can now provide some information about the origins and the life of Chiara Lubich. Chiara was born, 100 years ago, in 1920. She was born in the north of Italy, in Trent. Trentino region is a border country between the Mediterranean area and Middle European area. Cultural areas and political areas, very different. Chiara's father was Luigi, was a printer who favored socialist ideas. Her mother, called Luigia, was a woman of deep Christian faith in Roman Catholic Church. Chiara became teacher at primary school, working with the orphans in a Franciscan school. But very important, during the Second World War, starting from September 1943, Trent was hit many times by Allied bombing, terrible bombing. Faced with the death and destruction in a climate of hopelessness, Chiara experienced God as love and discovered him as her father. She decided to consecrate her life to God. Chiara was fascinated by the evangelical radicalism of St. Francis of Assisi and St. Clare of Assisi, the spiritual sister of St. Francis. And Chiara chose to base her life on putting the gospel into practice. Chiara and her companions chose the way of life of the first Christian communities, where no one was in need. They lived the virtue of charity with a deep desire to renew the social fabric of the city, which had disintegrated, destroyed due to war. they went to live in a community on the model of the family of Nazareth, the family of Jesus. And they called it Focolare, so that Focolare Movement. Focolare was small communities of lay people, men and women, devoted to God and called to spiritually generate the presence of Jesus. Chiara and her first companions carried with them only the gospel, and they meditated on Jesus' testament. Jesus' testament said, "May they all be one," the Gospel of John. The key word was unity. Unity with God and unity of the human family became the purpose of their lives and the base of Chiara's charisma. An impressive feature of thought and work of Chiara Lubich, described by Dr. Costanza, is the fact that she managed to embrace both sides of a changing era, like the time we are living, offering us ways of understanding both the present and the future. Her charisma was capable of penetrating cultural and religious dimensions, which were different from her own. She was also able to relate the spiritual and political leaders on equal terms, to present her convictions in international assemblies, and to cultivate relationships within all sorts of environments. Who listened to her perceived how her vision was based on the coherence between the reality of God and the reality of history. Like as in heaven, so on earth, like in the most famous Christian prayer, Our Father. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Gentilini. I really have to say you not only featured Chiara in a beautiful way, but also you already mentioned some keywords that I think must be also the object of our reflection this evening, but in general. You said not only unity, which again is the main topic of your biography, but community, social fabric, and reality, which is not so obvious, to be able to conjugate the ideal world with the real everyday work that you have to do. And so thanks for this opening. Now, Dr. Aram, you are not only an extraordinary personality with your work, but you have also had a role in the relations that Chiara built with India, because in spite of being so young, you met her where you still were a student, and you became one of her gateways of India. You met her before she actually came to India, and what I know is that she wanted to know from you insights of India, where then she, as I already mentioned, she then traveled twice. Would you like to share, for starters, a personal memory of Chiara?
Thank you, Your Excellency. It's really an honor in these difficult times to be able to speak about bridges between cultures and nations, because I think in this unusual period of human history, the word solidarity, the desire for unity is so deep. Yes, indeed, I met Chiara when I was only 19 years old, and I remember that very vividly. It was in the Vatican. Pope John Paul II had hosted for the first time the World Assembly of the Religions for Peace, the first inter-religious meeting in the Vatican. And my father was the moderator of the assembly. And at the end of the opening ceremony, which in itself was a piece of history, my father came down from the stage and my mother went up from her chair. And quickly, there was an exchange of smiles and greetings between my father, my mother, Chiara, and Natalia. I was just a silent witness at 90, but I did see the beginnings of a lifelong friendship, not only between individuals, but I think between the ambassadors of two wonderful countries where history so naturally is lived, where people consider themselves as the living evidence of what their cultures give. India and Italy has much to give to the world in the way history finds a natural confluence. But my real close encounters were then followed to this meeting in Rome. It was in Coimbatore in 2001 when we invited her, and she was honored by the Gandhian movement with the Defender of Peace Award, that I saw her closely. I saw her as a young host, as a young woman from India who was receiving a leader, a wise elder from another culture, another country. And very quickly, I recognized the leader, Your Excellency. I very quickly recognized the leader. But in the days that she spent in Coimbatore, the days that she spent in India, the days that she came visiting, the human side of a leader, the warmth, the ability to think beyond the usual boundaries. And it was this warmth of an elder that endeared me to her. And I say this because, as Dr. Gentilini said, she was not only 19 when she discovered this approach to life and to serving the world, but I was also in that age, and the warmth of an elder, sometimes you don't need words. An elder, a leader, can present that testimony in a very powerful way. And our discussion started. She asked me about India. She asked me about Hinduism. She asked me about my city. Many questions I did not have answers, and to a few questions I had answers. But what it showed to me was there was common ground. There was something that we both shared, and that was the love to serve our society so that tomorrow would be a better day. Dr. Gentilini spoke about that changing era in which she discovered her spiritual call, and what he aptly has put in the biography and titled it The Prophet of Unity. For me, that prophetic voice of a 19-year-old from a war-affected town of Italy is something that has always fascinated me. And therefore, what I also want to present is what happened subsequently. Subsequently, we did meet in meetings. We did address big meetings together. But what we also saw was this deep desire to work together, to bring people around needs. And that was, I think, the genius, but also the gift of Chiara. She spoke about poverty. She spoke about children. She spoke about interreligious harmony. All of these issues that were relevant in the 20th century and the 21st century to the people of the world. And therefore, again, I'd like to reiterate what Dr. Gentilini said. Not only did her vision of God and our call for unity have an ability to transcend boundaries, it also had a universal dimension. And you, Your Excellency, you're with us in India. The Indian spirit embraces this idea of the whole, of being able to see the particular in the gift of the whole universe, this universal dimension. We're also the land of the mystics. Whether it was Kabir, the great saint philosopher, or it was Ramakrishna Paramahansa, we are in that culture where we see the light in the elders, light in the people around us. And for me, therefore, the subsequent encounters with Chiara was primed by that spirit of India. The spirit of India that saw the gift of an elder, the leadership of a visionary as a universal gift. So with Chiara, we interacted and spoke about the needs of young people. She often called me, like many elders in India, and said, do this, do this. And I felt that it was my obligation to respond to her questions and to her calls. Two things, Your Excellency, that I want to present. And that is, I think, what is its relevance today in the 21st century as we meet in the midst of a pandemic? I think her gift, her vision of serving society centered around her spirituality is, I think, something we can reflect on. You know, spirituality or religion doesn't exclude people who have no faith or who see the world in a different way. In fact, spirituality and this dimension of living one's faith allows us to see what is common between us. And in the midst of the pandemic, almost 200 countries have been affected, about 70 million people. We have to rediscover this vision. And I rediscovered this vision with her multiple times. During her visit to India, Your Excellency, she was so curious about the markets, about how people lived, how religions coexisted, how young people saw their role in the future of this country and the world. And this curiosity, this childlike curiosity, I think, kept her alive to the problems around her. Remember, she was ahead of her times. She not only spoke about the role of consecrated members within the church, she spoke about lay people like me and you, who also have a role in shaping the future of the society tomorrow. So if I may say, she did what Mahatma Gandhi said is a true hallmark of a leader. Gandhiji said, "There goes my people. I must follow them, for I am their leader." And I think Chiara did that so wonderfully. She heard the inner call to unity and to live the gospel, but she also saw the direction, the needs of people, and followed them so that her gift would be a shared gift, not only for the people of Italy, but for the people of the world. And as someone who welcomed her in India, who paved that path of her journey and entry into India, I'm delighted that we are celebrating the centenary of a prophet, a prophetic voice, a young woman who from the town of Trento in Italy told the world unity is possible.
Very true, Dr. Aram. Thank you so much. Thanks for your memories, and thanks also for your comments. Many things, of course, but something I think it's extremely important of what you said. I'm here in this country representing Italy in the south of India, and I cannot be prouder of that. I feel at home in India like all the Italians do, and like I hope the Indian citizen do as well in Italy. But there's something more, as a diplomat, as a career diplomat, I would like to say there's something really important in ambassadorship, which is people-to-people relations. This is what Chiara did, which is so important. It's the foundation of coming together. We definitely have, and we have with India, relations that are deeply rooted and go far beyond the just official ones. We are excellent and we're very, very proud of, but we have so many people-to-people relations. Now, Dr. Gentilini, Chiara was a master of ambassador for unity and as Dr. Aram said, a prophetic voice from a woman, which I have to say was not so common, at least back then. Can you please tell us, from your point of view, what was this charisma that Chiara brought into the world?
Yes, unity is the principle of all intuition and realization of Chiara Lubich. As you said, she was even an ambassador of unity. Unity is capable of transforming the life of people of all ages, ethnicities, cultures, religions. A spirituality deeply anchored to the relationship of love present between the three people of the Trinity. Trinity is the most important dogma of Christian religions. Unity is a spirituality which has found correspondence and syntonies in the most unexpected place all over the world. Everywhere, meeting man's need for absolute, seeking dialogue and communion. Chiara always pursued relationships with representatives of other religions according to the principles for interreligious dialogue and the key elements of the spirituality of unity. Such dialogue started from walking side by side with people, communities and faiths as an expression of universal fraternity, and on the basis of the golden rule, I think, golden rule, which is present in all religions and which is the foundation of relationship between the faithful of every creed. In order to be authentic, dialogue need people open to a reciprocal exchange of views, mutually tolerant and open to the possible growth in knowledge. A dialogue between people is based on practical things, starting with their respective identities. It should be based on a search for what they have in common, avoiding any masking of their differences. It should be based on the wish to listen, to enrich each other, and to accept unity in diversity. The reciprocity is needed between believers of different religions. It expresses itself through mutual trust, mutual esteem, mutual knowledge and understanding, mutual acceptance. It rejects any egoism and avoids any kind of conflict. Dialogue starts from what is common and reaches harmony if it works where collaboration is possible. For example, such as peace, solidarity, justice. Now, some examples about the interreligious dialogue inspired by spirituality of unity and inspired by Chiara Lubich. For example, Buddhist spirituality and its doctrine of interior peace attracted very much Chiara's interest. Another example, on May 1997, Chiara Lubich had been invited to speak in the Malcolm X Mosque in New York, in Harlem. She was the first Christian woman to speak in a Muslim temple about creating a new universal fraternity and working together for the good of humanity. Another example, in India, Chiara built relations with the Gandhian-inspired Hindu communities, which demonstrated a surprising spiritual congruence with the Focolare Movement, the movement founded by Chiara. All their common spiritual experiences were marked by a strong disposition towards community and social development, education and peace. These experiences are inscribed in many ancient Eastern religious traditions. Their perspectives of faith are centered on an immanent reality of the human person that transcends the material and that aims at the elevation of the person and at the relationship with others. This is very important. The experiences and many ancient religion traditions, in particular in India.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Gentilini. This is very, very insightful, and I think we all are learning, not only thinking about terms and ideas, but really learning. What really strikes me is that all the verbs that you used so far are active verbs, are transactive ones. It's walking, working, meeting, even listening is an active verb, implies an action. It is not sufficient in a way just to have a desire or just to have an enlightenment that comes from looking upwards. We also need, Chiara tells us that we also need to actually do something. It's a real call for action. Now, since I know that Dr. Vino is a woman of action, and she As I already mentioned, she's the president of the Shanti Ashram that I visited last year, and I was delighted to really see the work that you do, Doctor, there. Since, again, you're a woman of action, can you tell us, as leader, in your leadership, in your day-to-day work and commitments towards your community, and to make your world, the world, a better place, can you tell us if there's something in the figure of Chiara, in her message, that inspires you in your work?
So wonderful that you mentioned that leadership is a verb. Leadership is about doing something. As I heard Dr. Gentilini reflect about identity as well, I think of another thought that India has given through one of its Nobel laureates, Professor Amartya Sen. Professor Amartya Sen speaks about the compositeness of identity, that every individual brings together many elements that define the identity of a person. And for me, in Chiara, I found such a beautiful harmony of the woman as well as the leader, of the Italian as well as the global citizen, of the thinker, the philosopher, the religious leader, but also the servant who was ever ready to serve people. And you know, Your Excellency, in these months of the COVID-19 pandemic, I have often thought of what is the true value of leadership. Not the theoretical lessons alone that we see of impact, of influence, of change, but the true essence of leadership that I hold very close to myself is the ability to help people to transform from where they are to better human beings. And this idea of transformational leadership is taught in the schools of diplomacy, but also taught in the schools of business and medicine. And what they say is that these transformational leaders who are capable of transformation of a scale that an individual cannot do, is the ability to influence. And here is where I think Dr. Gentilini is pointing towards charisma, or your question about what was the influence of this charismatic leader. We do know the Greek roots of charisma is charis, grace, and that blessing, Chiara did not take it lightly. When she discovered the light in the church in Tonadico, which I had the honor to visit, beautiful Dolomite Mountains of Italy, and this church set there, where we walked up and saw this. I think in that beautiful setting, when Chiara discovered her inner beauty, I think she discovered that this light had to be shared. And again, I think Dr. Gentilini's mentioned the dialogue starts when we have a common goal. And I think the goal was very clear for Chiara. The goal was that people have to be cared for, particularly the most marginalized, the most affected, the weakest amongst us. This was similar to what Mahatma Gandhi said, that the true impact of freedom in India would be when everyone can dream of a future where they are equal, Sarvodaya. But you know what Chiara did, Your Excellency? She was able to bring a living model. Whenever I was with her, I found the feminine example of leadership. Such beauty, such grace, and yet such power. We need more of those examples, Your Excellency. We're so glad that Italy has an ambassador in you. We need more women to take leadership roles wherever there is a need for society to change and to progress. Chiara also brought to me something very important, her example of hard work and perseverance. You know, that I have incorporated in my work. And I know when you work on issues like poverty, when you work on issues like health, Your Excellency, we're speaking of public health, these are generational commitments. And therefore, again, what Dr. Gentilini said, not only she developed a movement that believed in her spirituality of unity, but she brought young men and women from across the world into a working relationship so that they may serve the people around them. And therefore, the third thing that has stayed with me from Chiara has been what I saw in my parents, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. They saw as the ultimate goal of all their practical work, that vision of lasting peace. They knew the value of peaceful coexistence and what peace meant for people. It was a life free of hunger. It was a life where you could speak what you heard and what you wanted to speak. It was a life where you could participate in democratic institutions. I think I think Chiara has a lot to offer in terms of an example and a reference. Her work with politicians from around the world, her work in the field of education. And therefore, I feel the Defender of Peace Award that India gave her, the Gandhian movement gave her, is an acknowledgement of the larger impact beyond the movement, beyond just the tangible, beyond the word. It is this generational commitment to peace. The fourth thing, though, I think, and I want to go back to this young woman of Trento at 19, in the midst of the war, to be speaking of a new world that can be built on unity and mutual respect. We need those prophetic voices. And that I always have asked myself at Shanti Ashram when I travel across and work in India, what is my generational commitment to India? And one of the answers that comes quickly is to find women as equal participants in social work, in social development, in social progress. Gandhiji said beautifully, Your Excellency, he said, all work is half done when women are not involved. And I think the world, your generation and my generation, will have to bring that forward. Chiara started it. And therefore, I think this search for what is common, this search for common and bridges that can bring us together has to be sustained. In a time where we're celebrating her centenary, where the world is reflecting on how it has worked in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, I hope that prophetic call to unity from this young girl from Italy will be a reminder yet again that in times of crisis, but in times of peace, we still have to speak of that call for unity, that call to see the other in oneself. That's the Indian message. And Chiara reveled in that message. She kept asking me, tell me again, what is this Atman and Brahman? And I said, in very simple terms, my grandmother would say, the God within me is the God within you. Yes. The divine grace above is the shared grace. And I think, Your Excellency, as you ask me this question, I'm also reminded of the power of the world to come together. The power of the world to come together. We have seen in these months, not only have 200 countries been affected by the COVID virus, in modern history without an enemy, a visible enemy, 200 countries closed its national boundaries. And yet in the midst of this, the power of the mind, the power of the heart to find bridges of unity, of finding ways to live together and to work together probably is a reminder that Chiara's life and Chiara's message is still relevant in the 21st century.
I completely agree, Dr. Aram. Thank you so much. Your words resonate deeply in me, and it is absolutely true that you cannot hope in peace without equality. Equality is one of the preconditions for peace. And definitely the female population has to be equal. We are today at the end of the 16 days that every year UN Women and United Nations bring as campaign to eradicate violence against women and girls. And we really are participate actively into that, both in the multilateral forum and here also in Mumbai, with a beautiful project aimed at build an healthy response, not physical but emotional, to prevent violence. So I could not agree more that a beautiful way to celebrate also the United Nations campaign is to honor such a great woman as Chiara was at the far front of an entire world movement. But definitely you also mentioned what is the reality day by day. We are in the middle, still in the midst of the pandemic, of the COVID-19 pandemic. Everything has changed around us. Usually we would have been in presence rather than on a digital VDC. And this is why, since Dr. Gentilini, he's of course the author of Chiara's biography, but he's also a researcher and a journalist and a scholar and someone who has studied deeply the 20th century and how the changes come. Can I ask you, Dr. Gentilini, to tell us if there is anything that you think in Chiara's life, in Chiara's message, but also according to your knowledge, wider knowledge of this, the times that we're living, if there's anything that can help us to move forward in that, please.
1 million question. We know we are living in a changing era. For example, from the era of great divisions, both ideological and political, typical of the last century, the 20th century, we have passed to an era of fragmentation, even of the basic concepts of life, like war and peace, freedom and justice, democracy. Another examples, we have passed from relations to connection in our digital era. We are connected by Zoom. As never before, we need to redefine all the concepts underlying human coexistence and its future. For example, human rights, economy, environment, and about all of new keyword, fraternity. To get out of the general crisis, we need a total change of the whole framework in which we think and work. We need a paradigm shift. We need to change our rules and perspectives. We need to adapt our vision of the world around us. And before a new paradigm, a new normality is being established, there will be a time when all possibilities are open. Probably is our time. This is the chance when the new rules can be rewritten. But this demands that we identified the right direction and then follow it. I think the proposal and the perspective of unity suggested by Chiara Lubich could help us.
Thank you, Dr. Gentilini. I really like the idea that for once the paradigm shift that you envisage is based on fraternity, which is, of course, a truly powerful message that I think we all share, and this is what we work for in our respective environment and fields every day. I could not stress more that it is also a matter of work again. And Dr. Aram, can you please tell us if there is a moment where your personal belief, religious or like, becomes something reinforcing your quest for changes, for daily work? Is there a moment in when what you think and what you do, what you aspire and what you do reinforce themselves?
Thank you for asking me this question, because as much as I have been active during the COVID pandemic, working with the government, working with the community, all these values have to be lived. And I have seen many, many days when I have come away from our work in the community at Shanti Ashram, or I have come out of a meeting with the government and thought to myself, what drives me? What really drives me? And my mother often referred to this as your inner friend. She would refer to this whenever I did something right or I did a mistake, my brother and I, mostly when we did mistakes, my mother, because my parents had taken to non-violent parenting practices, she would say, go talk to your inner friend. And Your Excellency, this inner friend, I realize, is what I take from my faith. that the biggest gift is to be able to live what I believe. Respect the other person as you are. And in the COVID pandemic, I have realized how that reset button of reset has meant and has affected my work and my approach. It has renewed me. As much as we work globally, all of us have global extensions of our leadership and work. I have valued the local community, the person who has stood by their neighbor. You know, Pope Francis speaks about it in his recent letter in Fratelli Tutti. He says the global markets make you neighbors, but they necessarily don't make you brothers and sisters. So this thought that the other person in some way is the same life as me is what I have taken from my tradition, is what I have learned intimately from my parents, my family, but the children around me. And this is where, again, Chiara again speaks to me, not just as a leader far away, not just as someone who was born in another culture, in another time, in another era, but I think it speaks about the timelessness of values. And in this wonderful civilization of India, where religions have been practiced, but openness has been lived, I think for me, one value that I always hold close to my life is the value of looking at the paths to the divine. That it can be knowledge, if that is what I have. It can be practice, like you said, the karma marga, the word of action. It can be leadership, and leadership that can lead to change, or it can be reflection and contemplation. So it is not one thing that I'm saying, but it is the multiplicity of paths that my tradition, the Hindu tradition, gives me to reach the divine grace. And all these 4 paths is often what we deploy in modern world. The path of advancing knowledge, the path of leadership, the path of action, and the path, sometimes we practice less, but we need more and more, the path of contemplation and reflection. And therefore, Your Excellency, I hope that the people of Italy will find in this conversation also, not just the journey of a leader from Italy, a leader who influenced the world, but also the relevance of people like us, you and me, to continue this dialogue so that the future may be peaceful, the future will be built on the richness of what this world gives us, its values, its experiences, its problems, but also, I think, importantly, young people. And there again is the second thought from my tradition, is to look as children as our conscience keepers. Your Excellency, throughout COVID-19, I have placed the life of a child, the experience of children, central in the way that I position my leadership, my knowledge, and my experience. So as my father often told me and reminded me, a creative person, no matter where that source of inspiration is from, it can be from your faith, it can be from the people you serve, it can be just the vision of a wonderful world. A creative person is a positive force, a force for peace.
Dr. Aram, thank you so much. Thanks again for this. I think this dialogue between the two of you, well, mediated by me in this case, because of the medium that we're using, is extremely enriching. Actually, I feel I have a lot of food for thoughts and for souls. And definitely, you both agreed on many of the aspects of Chiara's life, and also the envision of the future. Sorry. I definitely think that what we did this evening here is to renew once again the India and Italian mutual friendship and mutual commitment, which is one of the great messages that I think we all share. And definitely it is true that it's not just one dimension, it's many dimensions. This is what Dr. Gentilini stressed so much in this beautiful book. I would like to show it to you again. Chiara Lubich, Prophet of Unity. It has been again published in Mumbai, and it is available in Mumbai. It is available at the moment at the St. Paul Book and Art Center in Bandra West, Mumbai. I've read it, and I think it is an important reading for the times to be. As both of you mentioned, it is the celebration of Chiara Lubich, but there's the reason why it's been written is because the message is still contemporary. A woman born 100 years ago still is contemporary in her thought and in her faith. Which with this, I think we are at the end of our conversation, of our event. I would like to thank deeply Dr. Maria Luisa Rossi, who is my colleague, and she has been so kind to represent me last year at the inauguration of the Chiara Lubich exhibition, and she is the one who made this event possible in many ways. I really had a great pleasure in talking to you, and thanks a lot for your valuable time. Your time, for both of you, is really important. I know Dr. Gentilini is a very, very constrained agenda, plus the time difference. So I would like to thank both of you, and really I hope we'll have more occasions for this type of conversation. And of course, I cannot wait more. I really look forward to host Dr. Gentilini in presence in India at his next visit. So thanks. I really hope it will be soon, Doctor. I really hope we'll have the pleasure to have you here in person. And I really look forward to meet again Dr. Aram and her amazing team. Dr. Gentilini, thanks for your work. Thanks for what you gave us. Not only your words, but your scientific approach to something that still is incredibly useful for our future. So I really would like to commend your work in that. Thanks a lot. It has been a pleasure. I'm sure the audience has enjoyed it as well. And well, I really hope to host you soon again. Grazie.